It has been sitting in the same spot for weeks. Same size, same number of leaves, just existing. You watered it. You fertilized it. You moved it to better light. Nothing changed. Here is what nobody is telling you. Stunted plant growth is almost never caused by what you think it is. The real causes are invisible, specific, and completely fixable once you know what you are actually looking at. I diagnosed 7 of these on my own plants before I understood what was really happening. Today, I'm saving you that entire learning curve. Drop a comment right now and tell me what country you are watching from. I want to see every location in this community. If your plants are stuck and you cannot figure out why, that is exactly the kind of problem we solve here every single week. Subscribe right now so you never miss a fix. Today, I'm walking you through every major reason plants stop growing, not the generic list you've already seen everywhere else, but the specific, underdiagnosed causes that most gardening guides never cover, and the exact fix for each one. We're going deep today. Let's get into it. Why standard troubleshooting advice fails you. Search, "Why are my plants not growing?" and every result gives you the same 4 answers. Not enough light, not enough water, not enough fertilizer, wrong temperature. Gardeners check all 4, fix all 4, and their plants still sit there doing nothing. Here's the problem with that list. Those 4 factors cover the most obvious causes. They do not cover the 7 specific mechanisms that actually cause the majority of unexplained growth stalls in real growing situations. Root binding, pH lockout, soil compaction, chronic low-level pest damage, ethylene gas accumulation, micronutrient deficiency masked by adequate macronutrients, and transplant shock that never fully resolved. Each one of these stops growth completely. None of them show obvious above-ground symptoms that match standard troubleshooting lists. All of them are fixable quickly once identified. That is what today covers. Let's go through every one. Reason 1. Root binding, the invisible growth ceiling. This is the most common cause of unexplained growth stalls in container plants and the most consistently missed in troubleshooting guides. Root binding occurs when a plant's root system has filled every available space in its container. Roots have nowhere left to grow. They begin circling the inside of the pot walls, layering over themselves, and eventually creating a solid root mass that occupies the entire container volume. A root-bound plant cannot grow above ground because growth above ground is directly proportional to root system volume and activity. Roots generate the hormones, absorb the water, and deliver the nutrients that drive above-ground growth. A root system that has run out of expansion space stops generating growth signals. The plant above soil stalls completely. Here is the diagnostic test that takes 30 seconds. Tip the container gently and slide the plant and its root ball out. If the root ball holds its shape without the container, if it is a solid mass of roots with little visible soil, the plant is root-bound. A healthy root ball shows white root tips visible at the surface of the soil mass, with soil clearly visible between roots. A root-bound root ball is dense, often dark, with roots circling the outer edge and little to no visible soil. The fix. Move up 1 container size, not 2, 1 size larger. A container dramatically larger than the current root ball holds excess soil that retains moisture the root system cannot access. That excess moisture creates wet anaerobic conditions that cause root rot rather than growth. Before repotting, use your fingers or a clean tool to gently tease apart the circling roots at the base and sides of the root ball. Straightening circling roots redirects their growth outward into new soil rather than continuing their circular pattern. Roots that continue circling in a new, larger container eventually strangle the plant as they thicken. This fix alone restarts growth in root-bound plants within 7 to 14 days in most cases. Reason 2. pH lockout. Feeding a plant that cannot eat. This is the cause that frustrates gardeners most, because the symptoms make no logical sense. You are fertilizing regularly. The plant shows signs of nutrient deficiency, yellowing leaves, purple stems, slow growth, despite receiving adequate fertilizer. You add more fertilizer. Symptoms persist or worsen. The plant still doesn't grow. You are not dealing with a nutrient deficiency. You are dealing with nutrient lockout caused by incorrect soil pH. Here is the mechanism. Nutrients in soil and growing mix exist as chemical compounds. The availability of those compounds to plant roots, whether roots can actually absorb them, is controlled entirely by soil pH. At the wrong pH, nutrients are physically present in the mix, but chemically bound in forms that root membranes cannot absorb. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and iron all have specific pH ranges within which they are plant available. Outside those ranges, they become locked. A plant growing in mix with pH of 7.5 is starving despite sitting in fertilized soil. Every nutrient application you make locks out further as it raises pH slightly with each addition. How to test soil pH at home without an expensive meter? Take a small soil sample. Add white vinegar. If it fizzes, your soil is alkaline, pH above 7. No fizz means it's neutral or acidic. For the acidic range test, take a second sample. Add baking soda mixed with water. If it fizzes, your soil is acidic, pH below 6. These tests are not precise, but they identify which direction your pH problem lies. The fix for alkaline soil, pH too high. Water with a diluted solution of apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon for 4 liters of water. Apply once per week for 3 weeks. Retest. The acetic acid in vinegar lowers pH gradually without the chemical burn risk of sulfur-based pH adjusters. The fix for acidic soil, pH too low. Water with a diluted solution of baking soda, 1 teaspoon for 4 liters of water. Apply once per week for 2 weeks. Retest. Baking soda raises pH gently. After pH correction, growth response in previously locked out plants typically begins within 10 to 14 days as newly available nutrients enter the root system. Reason 3. Soil compaction, the silent suffocator. This cause is almost never listed in troubleshooting guides, and it affects every container plant that has been in the same mix for more than one growing season. Soil compaction in containers develops progressively through 2 mechanisms. First, repeated watering breaks down the structural particles in standard potting mix over time. The air pockets that gave the mix its fluffy open texture collapse. The mix densifies. By the end of one growing season, most standard potting mix has lost 30 to 50% of its original pore volume. Second, root growth itself compacts the surrounding mix. As roots expand and thicken, they physically press mix particles together. A mature root system in a container has created a zone of compressed mix around itself that progressively reduces oxygen availability. Compacted mix suffocates roots. Plant roots need oxygen continuously. Oxygen deprivation slows root metabolism. Slowed root metabolism reduces water and nutrient uptake. Reduced uptake stalls above-ground growth. The diagnostic sign is water sitting on the surface of your container mix for more than 30 seconds before absorbing, indicating significant compaction. Healthy mix absorbs water immediately. Compacted mix resists water penetration. The quick fix without repotting. Use a chopstick, skewer or thin dibber to carefully create vertical channels through the mix around the plant. Push the tool down to the base of the container and work it gently side to side to open a channel. Create 8 to 10 channels distributed across the container surface. These channels restore air pathways through the compacted mix immediately. Water penetration improves. Oxygen reaches the root zone. Growth response begins within 1 to 2 weeks. Follow the aeration with a vermicast drench. 1 cup of vermicast steeped in 4 liters of water for 24 hours, strained and applied, to reintroduce the microbial activity that compaction suppressed. Reason 4. Chronic low-level pest damage. This cause is the most frustrating to diagnose because the pest responsible is often invisible or present in numbers too small to trigger a visible infestation alarm while still causing significant damage. Chronic low-level pest pressure, particularly from thrips, spider mites, and fungus gnats, operates below the threshold where most gardeners notice a problem. You do not see clouds of insects. You do not see obvious leaf damage. You see a plant that looks generally unwell and simply will not grow. Here is what is happening at the plant level. Thrips and spider mites feed on leaf cell contents. Individual feeding events are microscopic, but sustained low-level feeding across hundreds of feeding events per day reduces the photosynthetic efficiency of affected leaves measurably. A leaf with 5% of its cells damaged by feeding produces 15 to 20% less photosynthetic output. The plant receives less energy than it needs for growth while appearing superficially healthy. Fungus gnat larvae feed on fine root hairs in the top 2 inches of soil. Root hair loss reduces water and nutrient absorption capacity. The plant stalls for reasons that appear above ground as nutrient or water issues, but originate underground in root damage. The diagnostic check for each. For spider mites and thrips, hold a white piece of paper under a leaf and tap the leaf sharply. Examine the paper immediately. Moving specks of any color indicate mites. Tiny, elongated specks indicate thrips. You may need a magnifying glass. For fungus gnats, allow the top 2 inches of soil to dry completely. Adult fungus gnats emerge from the soil surface when disturbed. If disturbing the soil surface releases small, dark flying insects, larvae are active in the root zone. The fix for all 3. Neem oil solution. 2 teaspoons of neem oil, half a teaspoon of dish soap as emulsifier, 1 liter of water. Apply as a foliar spray to all leaf surfaces and as a soil drench for fungus gnat larvae. Apply every 5 days for 3 applications. Neem oil disrupts the hormonal systems of all 3 pest types simultaneously, interrupting their reproductive cycles and eliminating the population within 2 to 3 weeks. Reason 5. Ethylene gas accumulation. This is the reason that nobody outside of commercial horticulture ever discusses, and it is responsible for growth stalls that appear completely random because the source of the problem is often nowhere near the affected plant. Ethylene is a natural plant hormone produced by ripening fruit, decomposing plant material, and certain mold species. In controlled concentrations, it signals plants to initiate specific responses: fruit ripening, flower drop, leaf senescence. In higher concentrations from nearby sources, ethylene causes growth inhibition across all plant types. The plant perceives the ethylene signal as an environmental stress indicator and shifts its internal resource allocation from growth to stress response. Growth stops, resources redirect to cellular defense. Common sources in growing spaces: a bowl of ripening fruit on a nearby surface, a bag of potatoes beginning to sprout, decomposing plant material in a waste bin, a nearby plant with significant disease or pest pressure producing stress ethylene, poor air circulation trapping any of these sources in the same space as your plants. The diagnostic approach. Think about what has changed near your stalled plant in the weeks before the growth stall began. Any new source of ripening produce nearby? Any decomposing material? Any recent disease outbreak on a nearby plant? The fix. Remove any ethylene sources from the growing space immediately. Improve air circulation using a small fan if the space is enclosed. The growth inhibition response reverses within 7 to 14 days of ethylene source removal in most plants. This is why experienced growers never store fruit in their growing spaces and always maintain air circulation even in indoor setups. Reason 6. Micronutrient deficiency masked by adequate macronutrients. This is the troubleshooting failure that expensive fertilizer causes and that nobody talks about. Gardeners who use high-quality balanced fertilizers regularly are often the most affected by this problem because their confidence in their fertilizer program makes them look past micronutrient deficiency as a possible cause. Macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, are the primary growth drivers. They are present in almost every fertilizer in adequate quantities for visible results. Micronutrients, iron, manganese, zinc, boron, copper, molybdenum, are required in tiny quantities, but absolutely essential for specific enzymatic processes. Deficiency in any single micronutrient blocks those processes completely, regardless of how abundant macronutrients are. The specific micronutrient deficiencies that cause growth stalls without obvious dramatic symptoms. Iron deficiency. New leaves emerge pale yellow or white, while older leaves remain green. The plant continues making new growth, but that growth is chlorotic and photosynthetically inefficient. Overall growth rate drops significantly. Boron deficiency. Growing tips, the newest growth points, stop elongating. New leaves emerge small, distorted, and brittle. Growing tip death in severe cases. Boron is essential for cell wall formation and cell division. Without it, division at growing tips stops. Zinc deficiency. Leaves emerge abnormally small. Internodes, the stem sections between leaves, shorten dramatically. The plant looks compressed and stunted. Zinc is essential for auxin production, the hormone that drives stem elongation. The fix for each. Iron. Apply chelated iron as a foliar spray, which is chelated iron remains plant available across a wider pH range than non-chelated iron. One application produces visible green up in new growth within 7 to 5 days in new growth. Boron. Dissolve a pinch, literally a small pinch, of borax in 4 liters of water. Apply as a soil drench once. Boron toxicity develops quickly at excessive concentrations. One careful application is sufficient. Zinc. Apply a zinc sulfate solution at 1/4 teaspoon per 4 liters of water as a foliar spray. 1 to 2 applications 2 weeks apart corrects most zinc deficiencies. The preventative approach for all micronutrients. Apply liquid seaweed extract monthly to all container plants. Seaweed extract contains the full spectrum of micronutrients in bioavailable organic form at concentrations that prevent deficiency without toxicity risk. Reason 7. Transplant shock that never fully resolved. This is the final reason that creates the longest growth stalls and the one most gardeners never identify correctly because they assume transplant shock resolves on its own within a week or two. It does not always resolve on its own, and when it doesn't, the plant can sit in a semi-shocked state for 4 to 8 weeks, alive, superficially stable, but not growing. Here is what chronic, unresolved transplant shock looks like. The plant was transplanted, it wilted for a few days. It recovered, leaves lifted, stem straightened, color returned to normal, but growth never resumed. The plant has looked stable for weeks but produced 0 new leaves, 0 stem extension, 0 visible development. This is partial shock recovery. The above-ground stress symptoms resolved because the plant stabilized its water balance, but the root damage that caused the shock, broken fine root hairs, disrupted root-to-soil contact, has not fully healed. The root system is functioning at reduced capacity, enough to maintain the existing plant, not enough to power new growth. The specific fix: apply a rooting hormone drench to the soil. Liquid rooting hormone, available at any garden center, contains synthetic auxins that stimulate root cell division and accelerate root hair regeneration. One application drenched through the root zone restarts root recovery that stalled after transplanting. Combine this with a kelp extract drench, 1 tablespoon of liquid kelp in 4 liters of water, applied simultaneously. Kelp extract contains natural cytokinins that work alongside auxins to stimulate both root and shoot cell division simultaneously. The combination of rooting hormone and kelp extract applied together to a chronically shocked plant produces new root hair generation within 7 to 14 days and visible above-ground growth response within 10 to 14 days. The diagnostic system: how to find your specific cause. Now that you know all 7 causes, here's the exact order to rule them out when your plant is not growing. Step 1. Check for root binding first. This takes 30 seconds and is the most common cause. Slide the plant from its container. Examine the root ball. Solid root mass with no visible soil means root binding. Repot immediately. Step 2. Test soil pH. Vinegar test and baking soda test. Takes 2 minutes. pH problem means immediate correction with apple cider vinegar or baking soda solution before anything else. Step 3. Check for soil compaction. Pour water on the surface. If it sits for more than 30 seconds before absorbing, aerate immediately with a chopstick and apply vermicast drench. Step 4. Inspect for pest pressure. Tap test with white paper for mites and thrips. Disturb soil surface for fungus mats. Any positive result means immediate neem oil treatment program. Step 5. Assess the growing environment for ethylene sources. Ripening fruit. Decomposing material. Poor air circulation. Remove sources and improve airflow.